with the problem being particularly acute in the United States Air Force, with a deficit at the point of over 1,000 total pilots. And we are here today to hear from the armed services on their plans to stem the exit of pilots from the military. We know we cannot buy our way out of this problem, since the military cannot compete with the potential salaries and, in some cases, the lifestyle of the commercial airlines. So we must make sure the services are using all the levers in their control, from an increase in bonuses to changes in the assignment system to changes in promotion to incentives these pilots to incentivize these pilots to remain in the military. The Military Personnel Subcommittee will take every opportunity to thoroughly review and discuss the way forward to stop the outflow of military pilots. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses to understand the scope of the pilot retention problem and to assess the proposed for the services in increasing retention. Before I introduce our panel, let me offer Ranking Member Speer an opportunity to make opening remarks. Representative Speer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. The Armed Services Committee has been receiving quite a bit of testimony over the last few months on the issue of readiness. There remains some debate on the severity of the readiness crisis, or even whether it exists at all. For the most part, the solutions being considered by the administration and Congress involve fast funding increases so that the department can buy new equipment and end strength. The shortage of military pilots does, of course, have a direct impact on readiness. So the reaction to this shortage has typically been along the same veins, to throw more money at the problem in the form of cash retention bonuses. But without addressing the root causes, this will do little to stem the departure of valuable, experienced military pilots. As the witnesses and several members of the subcommittee are well aware, our service members are not in it for the money. Military pilots serve for love of country and for love of flying. There are many reasons besides money that military pilots leave the service for the private sector, including family concerns and a desire for more stability, too few flying hours, and too many assigned tasks unrelated to flying. Today, I'm interested in hearing how each of the services are working to identify these root causes and how you use that analysis and the authorities Congress has provided to better target non-monetary incentives as well as monetary in order to increase retention. I'm also interested to hear what joint initiatives you may be undertaking together across services. It costs millions of dollars and years of training to produce just a single aviator. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. We therefore need to ensure we are thinking broadly and creatively about how best to retain the skilled aviator the nation needs. Thank you, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Speer. We will give each witness the opportunity to present his or her testimony, and each member an opportunity to question the witnesses for 5 minutes. We would also respectfully remind the witnesses to summarize to the greatest extent possible the high points of your written testimony in 5 minutes or less. Your written comments and statements will be made part of the hearing record. Let me welcome our panel. Lieutenant General Mark A. Brilakis, Deputy Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, United States Marine Corps. Vice Admiral Robert P. Burke, Chief of Naval Operations. Lieutenant General Gina M. Grosso, Deputy Chief of Staff for Manpower and Personnel Services, United States Air Force. Major General Erik C. Peterson, United States Army, Director, Army Aviation. With that, General Brilakis, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Kaufman, Ranking Member Speer, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to provide an overview of the Marine Corps' inventory of pilots and aviators. Since the first Marine aviator flew in 1912, our pilots, like all Marines, have answered the nation's call, faithfully serving the American people and maintaining a first-class standard of military excellence. Today, Marine aviation is providing critical support to combat operations, and the Marine Corps is and will continue to be our nation's expeditionary force in readiness. Aviators and our aviation maintenance personnel are critical to our ability to meet the continued and increasing operational commitments, operational tempo, and challenging deployment-to-dwell ratios. While the Marine Corps does not currently have a shortage of aviation personnel, we are experiencing a shortage of trained aviators, particularly in specific platforms and gaps in the necessary qualifications of our enlisted maintenance personnel. This is, in large part, exacerbated by current readiness issues with our aircraft. Addressing these issues is one of mine and the Deputy Commandant for Aviation's highest priorities. Aviation readiness in the form of ready basic aircraft and the resources to operate them throughout the year is the single most important factor in alleviating our aviation manpower challenges and contributing to retention. Our responsibility to train and to retain the best aviators and maintainers for our Corps is an operational imperative for us. We vigorously attack the accession and retention of all our Marine occupational fields, and doing so for the aviation field is particularly important due to the time and expense required to train these Marines. We will continue to closely monitor the trends of our aviators and will take action should we begin to see a retention problem so that your Corps remains the most ready when the nation is the least ready. Thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony.
Thank you,
Now
Chairman
recognize
Kaufman, Ranking Member Spear, and distinguished members of the subcommittee for this opportunity to discuss the status of naval aviation retention. I'm honored to represent the men and women of the United States Navy. Naval aviation today is strong, the most capable maritime air force in the world, and our deployed units are ready to respond to any challenge. It is made up of more than 190,000 military and Navy civilian personnel, including 10,250 Navy pilots and naval flight officers who safely and effectively maintain, operate, and train with approximately 3,700 aircraft in support of worldwide carrier-based and expeditionary missions to include combat operations. On any given day, 2 to 5 of our 9 carrier air wings are deployed, returning from a deployment or preparing to deploy. Our ability to sustain this effort depends upon a number of factors, among the most critical of which is our people. So I'm here today to outline the current risks and projected manning challenges facing naval aviation and what we must do to sustain peak combat readiness. Our ability to attract and retain the very best young men and women our nation has to offer is central to maintaining aviation personnel readiness. A number of factors are making this challenge increasingly complex, including an improving economy with low unemployment and increasing opportunity for employment in the private sector, particularly within the commercial airline industry. Additionally, naval aviators have expressed dissatisfaction with quality of service resulting from readiness challenges associated with limited aircraft availability and reduced flying hours while not deployed, which have inhibited timely attainment of tactical qualifications and subsequent career progression. Those who wear the cloth of this nation do not do so for the money, but rather to be part of something bigger than themselves. Historically, we have also been able to positively influence retention behavior by providing a fair compensation package, but more importantly, we provide an enticement few other employers can offer, a call to service. However, the allure of service is diminished when readiness shortfalls inhibit sailors' ability to get the job done. Today, aviation depots struggle to get our airplanes through maintenance periods on time. These delays impact the time sailors have to train and hone their skills prior to deployment. Such challenges are further exacerbated by low stocks of critical spare parts and an aging shore infrastructure. While our first team on deployment is always ready, our bench, the depth of our forces at home, is thin and is growing increasingly frustrated. Additionally, operational tempo, uncertain deployment schedules, excessive administrative burdens, and quality of life issues for sailors' families, including late permanent change of station orders and limited housing options, especially in non-fleet concentration areas, adversely affect individuals' decisions to stay Navy. Restoring short-term fleet readiness will require sufficient and predictable funding, which will allow our pilots to fly the hours needed to maintain optimum proficiency and ensure our ability to conduct timely maintenance on our airframes. It would also enable the Navy to restore stocks of necessary parts, return more aircraft to operational status, and better prepare them to remain deployed as required. And finally, it would allow our pilots to do what they want to do, which is to fly. We'll continue to aggressively pursue resolution of aviator retention challenges through effective and responsible use of available resources and refinements to our plans and processes for recruiting, developing, retaining, and addressing the quality of service needs of our aviators. We welcome your assistance, look forward to working with you to address the challenges we face, and we appreciate your continued support for initiatives designed to help us achieve optimum personnel readiness, improve quality of service, and retain the best and brightest young men and women this nation has to offer. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Burke. Lieutenant General Grosso, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Kaufman, Ranking Member Speer, and distinguished members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss the status of the Air Force pilot shortages and our efforts to address it. America's Air Force has been globally engaged for the last 26 years in combat operations. During that time, we provided air dominance through global vigilance, global reach, and global power for our joint force. Make no mistake, your Air Force is always there. However, being always there comes at a cost to equipment, infrastructure, and most importantly, our airmen. And we are now at a decision point. Sustained global commitments and recent funding cuts affect capacity and capability for a full-spectrum fight against a near-peer adversary. Compounding this issue, an upcoming surge of mandatory retirements for airline pilots and an increasing market for global commerce is causing the civilian aviation industry to begin hiring at unprecedented rates. This confluence of circumstances has birthed a national aircrew crisis. This crisis is the result of multiple factors: high operational tempo over the last 26 years, a demand for our pilots from the commercial industry, and cultural issues that affect the quality of life and service for our airmen. As we closed fiscal year 2016, the total force, including our active, guard, and reserve components, was short 1,555 pilots across all mission areas. Of this amount, the total force was short 1,211 fighter pilots. It should be noted that the cost to train a fifth-generation fighter pilot to prepare him or her for their first operational squadron is approximately $11 million. A 1,200 fighter pilot shortage amounts to a $12 billion capital loss for the United States Air Force. Civilian aviation companies are actively recruiting the world-class experience of our rated airmen because Air Force pilots are highly attractive with their diverse experience and quality aviation training. Outpacing RAND's 2016 study, major airlines hired more than 4,100 pilots last year, and they increased the salary of their pilot force by an average of 17%. These annual hiring levels are expected to continue for the next 10 to 15 years. Civilian job prospects are not the sole reason the Air Force is losing talent. A 2015 exit survey revealed additional influences to leave include too many duties unrelated to flying, inability to maintain work-life balance, and availability of civilian jobs, in that order. The Air Force's plan to address these shortfalls is three-pronged: reduce requirements, increase production, and increase retention. The Air Force reduced the number of pilots filling operational planning positions in order to prioritize manning at flying squadrons. We also are leveraging our total force partners to bolster staff in operational planning positions, deployments, and in pilot training units as appropriate. The Air Force recognizes the need to increase pilot production and will expand undergraduate pilot training to maximum capacity at 1,400 pilots a year. Future increases in throughput will require additional manpower, infrastructure, operations, and maintenance resources. From a retention perspective, the Air Force is implementing many non-monetary programs to strengthen the culture and improve the quality of life and service for our airmen. For example, we reduced additional duties, eliminated non-mission essential training courses, and outsourced select routine administrative tasks in operational squadrons, just to name a few. All of these efforts give time back to our aviators so they can focus on their primary duty, flying. We are also grateful for your support to authorize an increase in the aviation bonus to $35,000 a year, the first increase in 18 years. Through a tiered business case analysis, we will identify areas of greatest need to retain pilots in exchange for a commitment beyond their initial service commitment. We are also considering incentives for hard-to-fill assignments where many airmen choose to separate from service in lieu of accepting the assignment. The Air Force is committed to a holistic strategy to maintain our pilot inventory as we face external and internal challenges. While we aggressively pursue creative means to respond to the demands on our pilots, our attention will be focused on developing an agile set of solutions. We will not hesitate to seek your support for revised or new authorities and resources as appropriate. We appreciate your support as we address the competition for our talented aviators and move out on bold and innovative solutions. Thank you for your time today on this important matter. I look forward to your questions.
Lieutenant General Grosso, thank you so much for your testimony. Major General Peterson, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Kaufman, Ranking Member Spear, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Army Aviation pilot shortages and our mitigation strategy. Army Aviation is an asymmetric advantage for our joint air-ground team, providing the reach, protection, lethality, and situational understanding required to win. At the foundation are our highly trained Army Aviation professionals. The pilot component of our total Army Aviation force consists of 14,000 rated aviators across the regular Army, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve. Several years of sustained fiscal constraints have required the Army to make difficult resourcing choices. Out of necessity, we've prioritized short-term readiness over long-term recruiting and training. We simply could not afford to train the number of new pilots we need to sustain a healthy force, a growing challenge that is masked by relatively healthy current aggregate strength. Specifically, we have accumulated a shortage of 731 regular Army Aviation warrant officers across year groups 2010 through 2017. We are temporarily sustaining acceptable aggregate pilot manning by relying on senior aviation warrant officers to fill junior positions, over 25% of which are retirement eligible. We are addressing these challenges, and we will build long-term readiness through 3 lines of effort: retention, training throughput, and accessions. Retention of experienced pilots is key to mitigating 7 years of constrained training throughput. Although overall Army retention is healthy, we have seen a recent increase in Army Aviation warrant officer attrition from 7 to 9% annually. Given growing commercial demand, we expect this trend to continue unless addressed. In anticipation, we are formalizing targeted incentives that encourage pilots to continue their Army Aviation careers and to retain those who achieve advanced qualifications. Additionally, we are correcting the accumulated deficit in our training throughput by fully resourcing our flight school. Fully resourcing our flight school is not a quick fix, and it must be phased in over several years. It will require consistent funding at increased levels to be successful. We are also increasing our aviation warrant officer accessions in concert with the increased throughput of our pilot training. Over the next 3 years, we will increase our regular Army Aviation warrant officer accession training throughput by nearly 170 students annually. In summary, we are addressing our pilot manning challenges while simultaneously meeting our enduring requirements. We currently have the sufficient authorities to implement our pilot retention, training throughput, and accessions increase. However, sustained, predictable, on-time funding and relief from the Budget Control Act are vital to any enduring solution that we attempt to apply. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for your enduring support of our Army and your shared commitment to our nation's defense.
Thank you, Major General Peterson. I wish to thank, I won't do that yet. So let me, if we look at the biggest reason on the demand side of this equation, I think it's 2 factors, and I don't know which one is dominant. So one factor is you've got an aging population of pilots on the civil aviation side, and that might have been aggravated by the fact that they increased the retirement age for pilots, and now we're hitting that increased retirement age, and so we're seeing some significant retirement. So that's obviously part of the demand side. But a significant part of the demand side, too, I would think, is that in response to an aviation accident, I'm trying to remember what year it was, I think it was in New York State, 2012, the reaction to that was to plus up the number of hours required to, I believe, 1,500 flight hours for the civilian airlines FAA requirement. And so the quickest way to get that is to look at the military, because that's very hard to get on the civilian side. And so, and I don't know if the FAA needs to revisit that number, if that was an overreaction to that accident or not. But that does seem excessive. So that's on the demand side. And then, so on the supply side, I believe, I know Lieutenant General Grosso, you briefed me on a retention bonus structure that you want to put forward. Do you want to tell the subcommittee about that? And before you do, let me just preface it by saying that I really think that within the National Defense Authorization Act, there really needs to be an econometric reevaluation of that number on an annual basis that will adjust accordingly. This situation is not going to last forever. It's a demand and supply curve, and eventually that demand is going to be satiated at some level. General Grosso.
Thank you, Chairman Kaufman. Sir, you are correct. In accordance with the guidance we received in the 17 Authorization Act, we did come up with a business model to understand where our greatest need was. And this model is the model we use to give all special and incentive pays across every skill set in the Air Force, which is about $927 million across the Air Force. But it has 4 factors: manning, retention, replacement cost, and replacement time. And manning is weighted at 40%, retention at 40%, replacement cost at 10%, and replacement time at 10%. And basically, you put all these numbers together and you get rank ordering. And based on the increase in the bonus, which you gave us in the 17 NDAA as well, we looked at the greatest need, and we stair-stepped it down to match the weapon systems that were most in need in accordance with your direction. And we will do this every single year. So the program we come out with this year could look different than the program we come out with next year, because to your point, the environment may change, and the people that choose to come and go will change.
Is the bonus structure the same across the board? Do you mirror the Air Force, or do you all have your own structure that you're looking at? General Brilakis.
Sir, thank you. And first of all, thank you to the Congress for the authorities in the NDAA. Since 2011, the Marine Corps has not paid a retention bonus to pilots. Our inventories were solid, and attrition was not a challenge. Now, what we did, we came down from 202,000, and we've arrived at 182,000. In doing that, and leveraging all the authorities that you gave us, the priority was to reduce numbers of Marines. And we saw an unequal reduction. And our retention, which is ideally about 91% for aviators in the officer community, fell down to 86 and 87%. So we lost some aviators. We've made that up through accessions, and our challenge right now is I've got about 500, just over 500 officers still in the training pipeline, more than I need.
Okay, good.
Okay. This year, the commandant, because in addition to reducing the size of the force, we're introducing new type model series into the inventory. The F-35, we're continuing the MB-22, the new versions of the Cobra and Huey, et cetera. The commandant is going forward requesting from the Secretary of the Navy and Secretary of Defense authority to pay a retention bonus in 3 communities. F-35, F-18, because the legacy platforms are our most challenged platform right now, and then in the V-22. F-35 and V-22 are currently growing communities, and we don't want to be caught short in those aviation communities. When we came down in the reduction, what we found is we're a bit imbalanced. We've got more majors and lieutenant colonels than is preferred. We have fewer company-grade officers than we really need to be flying in our tactical squadrons. And so we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to leverage to maintain those young officers as they come out of their required commitment to us and capture them for that extra bit of time before we've got them by the throat.
Thank you, General Brilakis. Ms. Spear, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your service to our country. General Grosso, the $35,000 bonus, I'm presuming that that's not going to be a check that's presented to the airmen on day one.
That is correct, ma'am. Aviators in the Air Force have a 10-year pilot service commitment. So that is when they graduate from undergraduate pilot training. So that training takes a year, and after that year, they have a 10-year commitment. So it's typically at the 11th year of service that an airman would be offered some form of bonus should we need it.
So, but is that $35,000 given in a lump sum, or is it given per year based on the number of years that the aviator would continue to serve?
So it can be a range of options, and every year we look at this differently. This year we're proposing to offer contracts for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 9 years, and 13 years. And you can take some of that up front, and some of it will be anniversary payments.
So no one aviator is going to get a $35,000 check, or will they?
It would, if they took it for a year, yes, ma'am, they would. And they would owe us an additional year active duty service commitment.
So conceivably, an aviator would stay a total of 2 years and get a $35,000 bonus in day one. And what happens if they decide to just quit? Do you claw that back?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you must recoup. And the thinking on the 1 year was because of the work that we're doing on the culture piece. Those things take time, and we have to build trust with our airmen, because after significant long periods of conflict where we took our eye off the ball a little bit, we've talked about putting resources back in the squadron. One of our chief's primary goals is to revitalize the squadron, and we think that's getting traction, but that will take time. And we've gotten feedback from airmen. They're going to give us a year, basically. So they're going to take it for a year and see if we really mean what we say with some of these quality of life and quality of service. And then that gives them a chance to relook and take it in another year, say, hey, are we doing better? Is my family in a good place? Did you do what you say were you going to do, Air Force? And then next year they'll go into we'll look at the environment, we'll look at what our retention patterns look like.
Okay, I'm just trying to get another question in. I particularly wanted to talk about non-monetary inducements. And I noted that in the report, there was a reference made to 260 days away during deployment for some of these aviators, and 110 days away even when you're on home temporary duty. So those are long stretches away. And in your actual statement, General Grosso, there's a chart here that shows that actually the ranking of the lure of civilian jobs is much lower than additional duties, which was at 37%, and maintaining work-life balance and meeting family commitments, which was at 31%. Availability of civilian jobs was at 24%. So I think the lure of commercial airline jobs has, while it does have some allure, I think addressing those top two would be significant. So to each of you, I'd like to ask the question in a minute 36, what, if anything, you're doing to try and address the non-monetary issues.
Thank you, Ranking Member Spear. We did a survey about 18 months ago, talking to our enlisted force and our officers on those issues of most importance to them. Flying hours is the #1 concern. They want more time in the cockpit. They want more time in the back. Number 2 was the parts available to get those aircraft up so they could do that flying. And then the third issue, which is the most concern to them, was the cycle, the tight cycle. As you know, the Marine Corps is on about a 1-to-2 ratio for deployment to dwell, and that's a very tight cycle. So 3 concerns. 1, they want more time to fly, they want more parts to fix, and they'd like a little bit more time at home.
Okay. Admiral Burke.
Yes, ma'am. Similar situation for the Navy as the Marine Corps. It's flying time first. Again, they're getting plenty of it while they're deployed. Our deployment lengths had ramped up considerably as our force size went down over the course of 15 years, while our number of ships at sea on any given day remained the same. That's starting to come under control now. Things like PCS move lead times shrank down as we used PCS funding as a means of making our top line budget come in within under control. So families were getting a month and a half of lead time to move in the summer, going to non-fleet concentration areas where it was difficult to find housing and things of that nature. And then just other sort of normal quality of service types of things, administrative distractions, career flexibility. We've really been using the tremendous flexibility that you gave us with the career intermission program to good effect, particularly in the aviation community. We've had 13 aviators in it, 9 have come through it, in fact.
Okay, my time has expired. Let's see if we...
Sir, we just had a female 04, was one of our top young helicopter pilots that would have gotten out. We were able to convince her to take advantage of the career intermission program and so that she could get out. She was married to a naval aviator as well, and she got out, started a family, just finished her intermission, came back in, did her department head tour, did absolutely phenomenally. Last week, screened for commanding officer, so another success story there. But it's things like that where we have to add the career flexibility while our pilots are out of the cockpit to do life things and come back in and re-enter the cockpit and be competitive in their careers.
Ms. Russell, you'll now recognize for 5 minutes.
Ma'am, we also have done, I would put it.
Actually, maybe you could fold your answers into responses. I'll come back to that question.
Right now, Ms. Russell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate all the things that you do. But a couple of the questions, it's bonus question time. How much does American Airlines offer bonuses up to for pilots, for regional pilots? Bueller, anyone? It's about $35,000. Interesting figure. And so, you know, once again, we go in this chasing around that the $35,000 is some astronomical figure, when the reality is that's competitive to what the airlines are providing to very junior pilots in the course of their careers. And you know, the phrase that comes to mind is nothing's too good for the troops and nothing's what they get. You know, so I applaud you, General Grosso, for putting together the proposals for the bonuses. They do retain. And General Peterson, if I may, because of your extensive background in 160th SOAR, you're a very unique pilot with a very unique background. If you don't have the types of pilots in our special ops aviation community, what impact does that have on the missions that our Rangers and our Special Operations Forces community do that we rely so heavily on for most of our missions? Could you speak to that for a little bit?
Without the retention of hand-selected and then exceptionally highly trained aircraft commanders, pilots in command, air mission commanders, we would not be able to accomplish the complex missions in support of our elite soft ground forces that our nation asks us to do. The physical skill, the planning ability, the judgment, the maturity, and the leadership would not be present, and we would not have the ability to accumulate and grow that in support of the missions that they are asked for. Further, we would not be able to sustain those capabilities over time. Those same leaders that are selected and are retained at some cost and investment are also the mentors and teachers for the next generation. So they serve to accomplish their missions today, but they also grow the next generation that our nation will rely upon.
Well, I can tell you from my own experiences, even as a combat infantryman, without helicopters to have conveyed us to a location, we would have had a lot less options on how to get to the enemy. And even without the United States Air Force, our paratroopers would have no delivery capability of any length to get to, or even logistics or emergency supply parts or any number of things. So really this pilot shortage goes beyond just having, you know, somebody with the flight suit and standing next to the aircraft with a cool picture. It literally is everything that our military relies on, no matter what their capacity is. And yet, a typical warrant, you're talking about the aging of the warrant population, even a W-4, what are they making, 60,000 a year? I'm not sure what it would be today. Anybody have an idea of what that would be?
Be closer to $80,000.
80, okay, so 80,000. And yet it takes $11 million to train a pilot to their first combat mission. Now, I'm not a mathematics major or a rocket scientist, but, $11 million or $35,000, let's see, retain them a couple of more years or not. It seems like a good investment because when we don't do it, much like the cliff that we had with our air traffic controllers in the 1980s when President Reagan said, okay, fine, you want to protest, we'll just hire a bunch of new ones, and they did. But then they all left in one shot. And 25% of the pilot force just in the Army, not only are you losing your most experienced warriors as they go out of the cockpits and out of the service, but you don't readily replace them, and then you're not going to have the incentive to bring them in. And so I just want to say for the record, I applaud what you do. We have to fix the problem. We can't ignore it. And we can't say, hey, we'll give you some busted up, Army Relief Service furniture or something in your quarters, and that'll be a good incentive for you. We have to do better. So with that, I'm out of time, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is really for all the witnesses. So better data is obviously critical in shaping the response to the emerging pilot shortage we have in the military. Have we undertaken a comprehensive survey to better understand the pilot attitudes, whether it's across the services or in each individual services or within each individual MOS or whatever it's called on the officer level, and the factors that drive their decisions to either renew their commitments to serve or to pursue other careers with commercial airlines or just outside of the military altogether? And we start from left to right with Lieutenant General Brilakis.
Thank you very much, Representative Gallego. As I said earlier, about 18 months ago, we pursued a specific survey to take a look at both officer and enlisted attitudes. Got good information from that. We are working on a longitudinal set of surveys that'll cover a Marine either from their first enlistment all the way through a 30-year career that allows us to go in and take a look at attitudes on retention and separation, et cetera. So we believe that will provide us better information in the future. The specific targeted survey that we did gave us really great feedback. It's not about money. It's not necessarily about jobs. It's about doing what they came into the Marine Corps to do, which is to fly airplanes, fix airplanes, and then serve those aircraft. On the officer side, our challenge is the number of ready basic aircraft. It's been an issue. We've worked hard through it. And having those aircraft available to get that flight time, get the pilots those hours per month that are necessary. On the enlisted side, it's the same thing. It's a satisfaction of seeing an aircraft you're responsible for actually take off, loaded with bombs to go do the mission. And so those are the things we're working on as well. On our enlisted side, we are looking at, we do bonus for retention, but we're also seeking to capture experience to retain it in the squadrons. And that's another initiative we're bringing forward this year. But you're absolutely right. Data is important, and we have specific data for right now, but we're working on having better data for the future.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We do the exact same approach in the Navy, looking at everything from things that will inform our entire portfolio of Sailor 2025 efforts, which is aimed at everything under the non-monetary aspect of things, everything from how we do detailing and assignments processes to evaluations and fitness reports to promotion boards and promotion policies, all the way down to our physical fitness programs and health and wellness things. But in addition to looking at all that data and our family services and spousal employment and all those sorts of aspects, though, I mean, we have a very good pulse on exactly where we stand with retention at our critical points. We target our retention bonuses for our naval aviators at the two critical points, which are department head, which is at the lieutenant commander level for naval aviators, and then at the post command level after they've had 05 or commander command. And we vary the rate at which we pay the bonuses by the type, model, and series of aircraft. And that's really largely a reflection of what their opportunities, how their job skills might translate into the outside job markets. And we know exactly how many have committed because the contract lengths are designed to obligate them through that critical career milestone. So we have a very good indicator at all times of how many we have committed, and we talk to them almost on a weekly basis, how many are on the fence, and how many are likely to say yes, and how many are definitely going to say no. So we keep a pulse of that all the time, and that helps inform our force management, if that answers your question.
We do, sir. There's a survey you'll see in the written statement, which is a retention survey that goes to the entire force every other year. And that's the data that the ranking member Spear pointed out. But we also have exit surveys. And an exit survey is a person that has told us they are going to leave. They have established what we call the date of separation. And so that gives you sort of more real-time thinking. And that, from our pilots, the data is about the same. Maintaining work-life balance is the #1 reason, and that's 45%. Availability of civilian jobs is 28%, and the potential to leave your family. And if you think about an aviator over their 12 years of commitment, in a 1 to 3 dwell, every 3 years they have deployed 180 days, and they come back because they're not proficient in the high-end fight. They go on TDY a lot to get proficient again. So when you're forcing them, sort of looking at their options, and the structure of the civilian airline industry, there's an incentive to get in early. So I realize I'm out of time, but.
Okay. Go ahead. Please, General Grosso, go ahead and finish.
So the way the civilian industry is structured, it's a sort of first in, move up system. So as you're at the 12-year point and you're looking back on a very busy life and things that we need to do better on quality of service, which we're working on, they say, gosh, should I get out and start my line number? Many of them affiliate in the reserve component so that they can start that successful second career for their family. And that's why that 12-year point is very important from a civilian hiring. And we know, we have data going back 30 years, that as airline hiring goes up, retention goes down, and we can correlate that.
Mr. Bacon, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you there, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all 4 of you being here today, again, for our subcommittee. Grateful to you. What I'd like to ask those who are doing the bonus, do we have some data that shows that it's actually effective, that it is a good return on investment? Because we know how many people sign up for the bonus, but how do we know how many of those would have signed up anyway to stay in? Do we have some data that shows that this does bring a sizable number over? And the genesis of my concern is a lot of the reasons people are getting out has very little to do with the money itself. It's more about the other factors that were mentioned here. So just curious, so can we correlate the number of folks that take the bonus by percentage, or that said that was the main reason why they stayed in?
I can't correlate it that way, but what I can tell you, we did look, people that don't take the bonus, 96% separate. So we do know the people that don't take the bonus separate, and we do know that about 2/3 of them go to the airlines. So 1/3 don't. But to your point, there's no question that you're paying some people to stay. So I think all of us would agree 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But because it's such a precious resource and because we invest so much money to make them, we think the trade-off is worth it.
But we're not really too sure how many of those sign up for the bonus would have stayed in anyway.
No, you are correct.
Okay.
Similar situation for the Navy. You get to a point where, for some individuals, it could be economic rent. Exactly right.
With respect to the Army, sir, we are not applying the bonus to this point to our overall forces. We have used it as a targeted incentive in our special operations community only, and we feel like we have very good return on investment and trends with that very small population. But we are anticipating employing some of these incentives beginning in FY18.
Okay. And I know you're not doing the bonus, I don't believe, on the Marine side. Right.
No, sir. This year in FY18, we will, for the first time since 2011, we'll offer a retention bonus in 3 communities, because those are the communities where we believe we have some concerns. But to your point, statistically, analytically, et cetera, there's really not a whole lot of connection between paying a bonus and guaranteeing retention.
It seems to me that we could get that data with a little bit of research and asking the right questions, because I think it would help make the case better that this is a good investment, seeing a direct correlation to more people signing up. Just my thoughts. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Let's see. Mr. Abrams, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By trade, I'm a physician, and when I refer a patient to a heart surgeon, I hopefully always send them to the best because they actually hold the life in their hands, much as your aviators do. The difference is they also hold the life in their hand while, by the way, dodging bullets. So it's a whole different dynamic on the level of our, not only our military aviators, but our military personnel and all. The other aspect is the intellectual knowledge base of an aviator that has been in service for 10 to 11 years is phenomenal. And I would compare that to a top-tier executive level in a company as IBM, one of the big ones. And when they give them bonuses, they're not talking thousands, they're talking millions of retention bonuses to keep that intellectual property in place. Major General Peterson, I'll ask you the question first. How does a CR for the remainder of fiscal year 17 affect pilot shortage?
In the very straight, simple terms, sir, it stops our initiatives to mitigate this. We will not be able to increase the throughput in our flight school with respect to investments in additional instructor pilots, contract instructor pilots, contract maintenance, as well as sustain additional airframes for the school. So it will essentially defer this problem another year until we have the requisite funding that has been budgeted for by the Army to implement these incentives. And then we will get closer to that cliff that we discussed about with the top-heavy population, the disproportionate top-heavy retirement-eligible population.
And if we carry that forward with an imposition of sequestration in 2018, what does that do for your readiness? General Peterson, I'll start with you.
In addition to exacerbating the pilot readiness challenge that we have, we will suffer readiness hurdles with respect to airframe material readiness. Very significant and important modernization programs will either be halted or slowed to include the CH-47 Block 2, the improved turbine engine program, the future vertical lift initiative and program. Probably most salient and important is that we will slow or defer very important protection and countermeasures initiatives that are underway right now.
Other comments on the CR-17, how will it affect each of y'all's services, if you don't mind going down the line?
Yeah, real quickly, sir, very similar to General Peterson. We won't be able to execute the bonuses that we'd like to. Our retention season actually begins in July. So that'll be impacted. The funds that are available to do that won't be available. We will, by the summertime, have to basically idle 24 flying squadrons.
Wow.
And then on top of that, with the lack of spares and repair parts, we are going to take a step backwards on the readiness efforts that we've done to bring back the number of ready basic aircraft that are available for our pilots to fly.
Admiral Burke?
Sir, for the Navy, we would be forced to reduce flight hours for across all naval aviation, 15 to 20% reduction in fleet replacement training squadrons. Those are the training squadrons. 1/3 of our junior aviators would not be able to complete basic qualifications and certifications. So squadrons going forward would be 20 to 30% undermanned, and that would pay forward for several years. I would be forced to cut sessions by 1,000 going forward in April. That would translate directly to gapped billets at sea and ashore, including ultimately pilots, instructors, and aviation maintenance folks. And then there would be impacts to PCS fundings, which would cause delays in issuing orders and quality of service and quality of life, as we've discussed earlier. And then similar to what General Brilakis laid out, we would have to stop bonus payments on most critical skills. So it would impact retention of, experienced and specialized sailors, including aviation officers and aviation maintenance rates.
General, real quick.
I echo, very much like the other services. It would have a devastating impact on our readiness, and we would have to stop flying, which has all the other negative consequences of trying to keep these aviators in the force.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just one comment. It's my understanding that now it's difficult not only to maintain just currency, but certainly to maintain readiness, and those are two different numbers of flight hours. I understand that, to be able to fly the plane, but to be able to fly and fight are two completely separate and distinct issues. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the indulgence.
Dr. Winstrup, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. One question, what is tougher right now, recruitment, initial recruitment, or retention? What do you have the most trouble with if we get down the line?
Sir, fortunately, neither is a problem.
Navy overall recruiting is good. We just made our 120th consecutive month of meeting our recruiting mission. We're seeing beginnings of fraying at the edges. Overall retention is good, although we're seeing individual specific areas such as aviation officers, nuclear rates, special operations forces, and information warfare, cryptological types of rates. We're having individual retention challenges there, but we're able to manage those with the authorities we have right now.
Okay.
We have no issue recruiting talented people to be aviators. Our sole issue is retention, and we're not retaining enough to sustain the force.
Okay. General?
We are not facing challenges with recruiting either. However, that recruiting pool is artificially restrained because of our throughput challenges due to tough fiscal decisions. We are seeing leading indicators of impending retention challenges based on the retirement eligibility of our force, as well as the increasing commercial demand.
And I just have another point of curiosity, I guess. You're getting exit information, exit surveys. On the exit survey, do you ask them why they joined to begin with? Or do you know that on entry? I imagine the entry reason is pretty much the same for everybody, to be honest with you, for many reasons, wanting to serve, et cetera. But on their exit, do you ask them why they joined? And I'm just curious, like what changed for them to want to leave?
So what our experience, I commanded the recruiting force for a couple of years, so we had the opportunity to kind of watch that. And you're right. I mean, the American youth join the service in general for a number of predictable reasons. Why they join each different service, again, some predictable reasons. Why they leave, sometimes is the opportunity to remain in the Marine Corps. We only retain about 27% of every year's cohort because 2/3 of our force is in the operating forces, and about 1/3 in the supporting establishment. And it's a young force, a fighting force. When I answered your question, I was talking about the aviation enterprise, aviation maintainers, et cetera. We have some retention issues in the cyber force and some of the high demand, low density MOSs. Some of the reasons folks leave those is because there are opportunities on the outside. I mean, I can take a cyber Marine who's getting paid maybe $55,000 a year. He's leaving and picking up a job for about $190,000. Yeah. Those are challenges that I don't think you're going to give us enough money to throw at those particular problems. But why they come and why they go have been pretty much standard across the board. Okay. The thing that's amazing right now is with the employment rate as low as it is, we're still finding good people who want to serve.
That's good to hear. Good Americans. I'm referring more to aviation than anything else. Admiral.
I think a lot of people, well, now that you've changed it, the question to be specific to aviation, I mean, they join for the adventure and to be that part of something bigger than themselves. And I think they find that here, and they're generally very happy with it. Why they leave, I mean, all the reasons we talked about earlier, but then there is the family separation thing. We ask a lot of our folks, and it is not for everyone.
I'm guessing a lot when they enter are younger, for one, and possibly single at the time.
They grow up, mature, and
Yeah, so,
things change.
General?
Yes, I would agree with that. They're just at different points in their life. I think you make decisions depending on your situation 12 years later,
Right.
which is very different than when you joined.
Right. Thank you.
Although I can presume that the trends are probably the same, I'm not aware of any specific question that we're asking on an exit survey that would substantiate that.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Kelly, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Peterson, I'm going to start with you real quick and talk about ARI. And they asked about, or they were going to get UH-72 Lakotas to modernize and enhance pilot training at Fort Rucker, where they train our aviation pilots in the Army. The goal was to retire the older fleet and create a more relevant, safer, and cost-effective training. Could you update us on how the modernization of helicopter pilot training is progressing to include observations from the initial pilot training classes on the Lakota trainer?
Our modernization efforts are slowed a bit right now, just partially due to fiscal decisions on our fielding plans for the Lakota, as well as some ongoing litigation. The Lakota is proving to be an exceptionally reliable and very beneficial trainer. It is too early to comprehensively substantiate the full benefit. What we do know is that the use of a more complex aircraft in initial pilot training, a twin-engine aircraft with essentially a modern glass cockpit, is translating very well to the assimilation of skills in the combat aircraft that the initial entry aviators transition into for their subsequent training phases. And we're looking forward to substantiating that and objectively documenting that as we get to the pure fleet. At this point, we are roughly half and half with respect to the very early phases with our legacy fleet training aircraft and the Lakota.
And we've talked about, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but the bottom line is there's a lawsuit that is slowing that down, and that definitely has an impact on not going forward and replacing with something that has an impact on our training and readiness and the ability to train our new pilots. Would that be correct, General Peterson?
It does, but we are compensating with the extension of the legacy aircraft, which was proven in past years, sir.
And this is, I think I'm going to talk, Lieutenant General Grosso. One question that I have: the $35,000 bonus. It amazes me that anyone questioned. After 5 years in service, that 11-year captain that gets out, or warrant officer, that 11-year person at that time that's critical, when they go to the airlines, 5 years later, they're probably at the airline making double what a U.S. Army major or U.S. Air Force major or a WO3 would be making at that point. Would that be correct?
The data we have right now is very quickly you'll get to $160,000 a year. So probably, I haven't really done the math, but I think that's correct.
Yeah, and quite a bit. And those folks, and that's not for the 20-year guys. I know I've missed every bonus I've ever been offered because I was too old to get it and been in too long when it became critical. But that is those 11 and 12-year people at that critical stage, that mid-level management. That is when that $35,000 is applied, that critical point in their career. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And just and this is for all three of y'all, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but there's some things you can't replicate. You know, the CTCs in the military and the Army, or your red flags in the Air Force, or those things. But does anything replicate combat experience other than combat experience?
I think it's relative to the combat experience you've gotten. If you're doing low-level counterinsurgency operations, you're getting a much better overall training experience at Red Flag or at the Fighter Weapons School or at WTI. That's all high-end stuff against simulated high-threat IADs. But, I mean, combat is combat.
And again, those things are great, and I've done many of those things, but it still doesn't replicate. And then the final, I guess the final question that I would have is, it's not just the flying experience that you lose, it's also that command experience, that leadership, that management. So a brand new flight trainee coming out of Columbus Air Force Base in my district does not have the same skills as that major who's been an operations officer for a squadron. Would that be correct, Lieutenant General Grosso?
Yes, sir, it would.
And so just taking out the flying side of that, you can't replicate that leadership experience at those critical levels, mid-level management, whether you're talking about maintenance or in the NCO level, or warrant officers who are WO3s, or majors or senior captains. You can't replicate that anywhere, can you?
No, you can't. It takes 10 years to make it.
And if you get out, you can't get back in and start over at the same spot, can you?
Well, we do have programs to bring people in that have separated, but it's challenging because we don't have enough capacity to train them again.
Yes, ma'am. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Let's see. Colonel Martha McSally, United States Air Force, retired A-10 pilot.
Thank you,
now
Mr.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Olive, for your testimony. I think you've talked about it to some level, but some of the conversations I've had with some of the leadership in the services is about it not being a win-lose and a finite pie when we're looking at this as a nation. We've got requirements for our airlines, and a good, strong, growing economy and airline industry is good. We've got requirements for our military, and if we're looking at this as a finite pie and win-lose, in the end, we're not going to be able to compete probably with quality of life and resources, and especially at a time where pilots are not flying, and because of sequestration, they're doing more creep and all the stuff that drives you crazy, right? And impact on the family. So what are you all thinking innovatively about turning this into a win-win to partner with the airlines for individuals to be able to fly in the military and maybe have seasons of flying with the airlines and then come back for a 3-year tour later on and then go back to the airlines, so that we're partnering together and we're all winning as opposed to competing with each other?
So, ma'am, our chief is meeting with the senior executives in the airline industry, and we're looking at just that. And based on the authorities that Congress has already given us with the Career Intermission Program, we are going to see if we can get, to your point, a win-win and get some predictability for the airmen who may want to start their line number early, and get predictability for the Air Force. And how can we get a better win-win? And we're also starting to look at, can we allow aviators to fly part-time on their own? So I think those are just two ideas, and there's, I think, many more ways to think about this for the nation to get a win-win between the military and the private sector.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you think about the bonus and people at that 12-year point, taking the bonus, in the past, maybe you get somebody inching towards the 13, 14. With the old retirement system, even if they didn't necessarily want to stay, they would start to make a decision like, well, I might as well just suck it up and get to 20 now. I mean, not everyone's like me thinking about getting out at 18 at the last time that I previously did. Most normal people, I think, as they get closer to 20. Are you concerned about the blended retirement system and that not providing a hook, to bridge them from, say, 13, 14 to 20 now, that they have the option to leave? Is that, you think, going to be a factor?
Well, we are concerned because we really don't know. We do a lot of force modeling, and we know how the old retirement system pulls people. So you're exactly right. But we do have that continuation pay in the new retirement system, and that the intent of that is to get people to 20. So we're going to have to be very agile at executing that.
Any other services?
I would just add, we thank you for the help in FY17 NDAA that gave us the flexibility of the timing on that continuation pay. That was very important to us because we see that as a component with existing retention tools that we have, because we're going to probably have to modulate those other retention tools along with that continuation pay to influence retention behavior. So together, we think we'll be able to influence the behavior that we need to get them to 20 and beyond.
Great, thanks. I think the career intermission is a great first step in a direction of, I just think in general, the next generation, they want to be able to move in and out of the workforce, go get different experiences. I think we need to open up that revolving door. And when you think about the millions of dollars it takes to bring somebody to become a 10-year pilot, for example, how long does it take to replace a 10-year pilot, right? The joke, right? 10 years. Many of them got out and didn't go to the airlines. Maybe they, went to start a business of their own, or they tried some other, grass is always greener, and now they're realizing they miss the camaraderie, they miss the mission. So I'd really urge it to look, and it's challenging to try and find these people. Where are the experienced pilots that have left? Maybe they're 2, 3, 5, 8 years out, doesn't matter. I mean, retraining them with the experience they've had and bringing them back, even for just one assignment, is worth the investment if you can find them. Are you doing any initiatives to go find those that are not in the airlines, but working in many different sectors of the economy?
We have a return to active duty program. It's got to be a short MOS. We're looking for the talent. I'm not quite sure we ever looked at anybody being away for 6 or 8 years. Still have a PFT to get past, but we are open. We're open to those opportunities.
Yeah, I just think it's that kind of sort of innovation that we got to be thinking of in order to not say, oh, we got to produce some more pilots and just start at the beginning of the, the line again.
Yes, ma'am. We've had conversations with industry as well, similar to what General Grosso discussed, and we're taking a look at the SIP and how we could fit that into a model that works for us.
One of the items we're working on under Sailor 2025 is more permeability between the active and reserve components in the Navy. We're nowhere near as permeable as the Army and Air Force are, and would like to get more. But recently we brought a number of reserve component airline pilots now, but they were former naval aviators in to help us stand up our remote pilot Triton project down in Jacksonville, and they wanted to stay, so we were able to help them out. So after having gone to the airline industry, they wanted to come back. So there is a little bit of that dynamic as well.
Great, thanks. I'm out of time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. McSally. Vice Admiral Burke, going back to this retention bonus structure, can you brief the subcommittee in terms of what you are looking at right now in terms of the bonus retention structure?
Yes, sir. Our current structure right now, we've got two main points of concern. So our department head area is the most critical, and that applies for lieutenant commanders. And we pay by type model series or community, the type that they're flying. Our most critical needs right now are electronic attack aircraft, strike fighters, and then helicopter mine countermeasures. And those folks are getting the top rates, and we're paying them at current rate is $25,000 per year. And then depending on type model series, other are less. And they're eligible for that after they finish their initial obligation, which is 8 years after winging. So typical winging occurs at about the
Define winging.
Yeah, 3 years. You get your naval aviator wings at about the 3-year point after you finish flight school.
Okay.
So it's probably somewhere between 10 and 11 years of commissioned service is when your active duty service obligation is over. So they become eligible for this bonus, and this bonus now obligates them for 5 years, which takes them through a department head tour and all the way through. If for some reason they don't select for 04, they don't make it through their department head tour, we recoup. So it's they don't get paid for that which they do not serve. So there's that aspect of it, and then we vary the rates. We put some economic factors in there. We have some economic modeling that we base the rates on. It's not extremely sophisticated. It's the best that we have available to us. We're working to get much more predictive analytics behind it and make it more sophisticated as we go forward. And then we have our second critical zone is the post-command level. So the first command opportunity is at the 05 or commander level in the Navy. And then we ask them to obligate to the post-command level. There are numerous post-command jobs on aircraft carriers such as, you know, the operations officers, the air bosses, things like that that run critical operations on aircraft carriers. And we need them to obligate to stick around a little bit longer. And we structure that bonus to keep them at least through the window where they would make 06. The theory being that once they make 06, they'll stick around a little bit longer. So that's a 2-year bonus at $18,000 per year. And both of those have had some positive effect. We're not getting exactly the response we want, so we're going to tweak both of those this year, both in terms of the bands and the numbers a little bit, but don't expect to make full use of the legislative authority that you've given us, but we're going to move them both a little bit up in each direction. One of the ideas that we're looking at here is something that we did in the surface warfare community last year. We tied merit to the bonuses as well as need, and early look screeners for the next milestone. So in the case of aviators, if you screen early for department head, that's based on a look at your professional performance. The idea would be perhaps they're eligible for the bonus earlier and could get extra payments for it. Thereby you're securing a contract with the best talent sooner. So we're looking at structuring something along those lines. But right now we're paying for those 2 specific windows at a fraction of the available authority you've given us.
Major General Peterson, United States Army, what's your approach in terms of retention bonuses going forward?
Sir, we're looking at 2 specific targeted windows at the outset. First is at the cessation of their obligation for flight school, which is the 6-year mark. That will be the first hook for a multi-year commitment subsequent to that. And then at the retirement window to retain that talent subsequently. It's too early for us to tell the impacts of the blended retirement and the opportunities that may pull that window left to that 15-year mark, but we are looking for those leading indicators. And then last, we are exploring warrant officer aviation incentives, not tied to merit, but tied to actual objective qualifications for advanced qualifications and skills, sir.
Sure. Let me just say one thing to all the services, in that I believe that this situation is temporary, this national shortage of pilots. And my concern is what always seems to happen in government is that there's a response to it, and somehow that there's a feeling that once that response is baked in, that it's permanent. And I just want to stress that this is really a temporary solution to a temporary problem. And I fully expect that we will come up, that you will come up with dynamic measures that as this problem recedes, that these retention bonuses recede. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I would also like to point out that I have a friend who did over 30 years at United Airlines as a captain, and you know, pilots talk, and the United Airlines retirement system went belly up, and instead of getting $150,000 a year in retirement benefits per year, it was reduced to something like $60,000. So it's something to remember too in terms of the solid nature of the retirement system that exists in the U.S. government. So a couple of quick questions, and I won't belabor any of this. General Grosso, there was a time in the not-so-distant past when the Air Force was giving the same bonus out to all pilots, regardless of whether there was a particular need in a particular specialty, so that a tanker pilot was getting the same bonus as a fighter pilot. Have you changed that now so that it reflects more in terms of what your need is?
Yes, ma'am, we haven't. I can give you great detail when you have time.
Okay. I was kind of alarmed when I heard in answer to one of my colleagues' questions about the continuing resolution that we would conceivably be in a position where we've offered a bonus to an aviator, and then because we're doing a CR instead of an appropriation, that bonus that we end up reneging on that bonus? Is that what happens?
The challenge in the CR, if it wasn't authorized in the previous year, we're not authorized to pay it. And so if we had planned to pay a bonus in the FY18 year timeframe that we weren't paying, and remember, we're going to be doing a bonus for the first time in 6 years. So it's not in our 17 budget. It wasn't in our 16 budget, and so it won't be available to us in this 17-year budget. And the flexibility, we'll have to reprogram, we'll have to go for a specific reprogramming action to free up the dollars to be able to do that.
But we now have a contract with this aviator to give him this bonus, and we're reneging on it, or you're saying we're reprogramming dollars so you're able to pay that bonus?
It's about reprogramming the money.
Got it. Okay. I think it's really important not to renege on these bonuses. I think that would be a disaster in the making. I think it was you, General Brilakis, who was talking about parts, was it not, or was it you, Admiral Burke?
I did, ma'am. I think we both.
Okay, so we've been focused on the pilots, but as you pointed out, if you don't have the parts to fix the planes, the pilot can't fly. And what are we doing about the mechanics? Is there a shortage of mechanics that we should be addressing as well? Could you just...
So on the, for our part, on the enlisted maintainer side, our challenge is not necessarily the number, but it's also it's the experience. Your aviation maintenance Marine gets his basic training in his field, but on top of that, there are additional certifications because aircraft are so critical. And the fact is, every time you go up, we want you to come down in the same way. They have certifications that are required. Those certifications take time, upwards of a year or multiple years to receive all the different certifications so you can sign off on the maintenance. Our challenge has been in the drawdown, the availability of those Marines with those experiences, et cetera. So on the enlisted side, while we do pay retention bonuses to manage the numbers, we're also pursuing in the beginning of this next retention year what we call an Op-4 kicker, an additional payment for Marines who are willing to re-enlist and then go in that 4-year re-enlistment, 24 months in the squadron, retaining those capabilities, because more often than not, a Marine who re-enlists has a location option. He may want to go to recruiting duty or at the drill field because our Marines serve across the Marine Corps. This bonus is going to take that experience, hard-won experience at the senior sergeant, staff NCO level, retain it in the squadron in certain numbers so they can train the next generation in those certification requirements. That's new for us.
Anyone else have any comments about mechanics?
We're in good shape, mechanics.
Okay.
All
right.
just
Ma'am, we are short mechanics based on decisions made in the 14 President's budget. We are ramping up accessions and having no trouble bringing new airmen in, but obviously there will be an experience gap. We expect to be balanced in FY19.
We're reasonably strong with respect to our mechanics. However, we do have experience challenges that have been brought on by force management levels in recent years where mechanics have not deployed with their units and have been replaced by contractors. We're overcoming that now, but we will not regain that years of experience.
Mr. Chairman, I won't ask this last question, but I do want everyone to think about it. We're not using aviators in the same way, in all likelihood, that we've used them in past wars. And with the advent of drones, I think we all have to think about the makeup of our forces in terms of the technological advances that have taken place and how we are going to engage in subsequent actions around the world. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Spear. Just a very quick point, Major General Peterson, that entire issue with force management levels and leaving maintenance personnel behind so we don't reach some artificial cap in Afghanistan and use private contractors in their stead was a horrible decision in my view, and it's something that this subcommittee needs to revisit and make sure that it never occurs again. I wish to thank the witnesses for their testimony this afternoon. This has been very informative. There being no further business, the subcommittee stands adjourned.